أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن، خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان، والنجم والشجر يسجدان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان، ألا تطغوا في الميزان. وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. والأرض وضعها للأنام، فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام، والحب ذو العصف والريحان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار، وخلق الجان من مارج من نار. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ رب المشرقين ورب المغربين، فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ مرج البحرين يلتقيان، بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ كل من عليها فان، ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يسأله من في السماوات والأرض، كل يوم هو في شأن. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا، لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يرسل عليكما شواظ من نار ونحاس فلا تنتصران. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فإذا انشقت السماء فكانت وردة كالدهان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فيومئذ لا يسأل عن ذنبه إنس ولا جان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ يعرف المجرمون بسيماهم فيؤخذ بالنواصي والأقدام. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون، يطوفون بينها وبين حميم آن. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ ولمن خاف مقام ربه جنتان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ ذواتا أفنان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فيهما عينان تجريان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فيهما من كل فاكهة زوجان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ متكئين على فرش بطائنها من استبرق، وجنى الجنتين دان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ فيهن قاصرات الطرف لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان؟ كأنهن الياقوت والمرجان. فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان ومن دونهما جنتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مدهامتان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان فيهن خيرات حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان حور مقصورات في الخيام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان لم يطمثهن إنس قبلهم ولا جان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان متكئين على رفرف خضر وعبقري حسان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان تبارك اسم ربك ذي الجلال والإكرام صدق الله العلي العظيم. سورة مباركة الفاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحت كل اسم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبت وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إله نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من كربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني باسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك السؤال من اشتدت فاكته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب كحرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لكبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عمل الكبيه بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من كبير سترت وكم من فادهم من البلاء أكلت وكم من إثار وكيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وكسرت بي أعمالي وكادت بي أغلالي وحبسني النفع بود عملي وخدتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفزحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور أتوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأل كشف الضر والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترز فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أحوى وأسعد ولا ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي في قضاءك. والزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وثاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني وركة جلدي ودكة عظمي. يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك والسالف برك بي. يا إلهي والسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد ما انتوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج بي لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك الساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك الصادق وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارها ساعة الأوطان تعبدك الطائية وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاري على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثور يسير بقاء كثير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاري فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي والسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي لعليم العذاب والشدة أم لطول البلاء ومدتي، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي والسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وحبني صبرت على حر ناري فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك. أم كيف أسكن في النار والرجاء عفو، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناتك لا ضجن إليك بين أهل هذا جيج العاملين، ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولو نادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية أعمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتك وذاك طعم عذابها بمعصيتي وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته وهو يضج إليك ضجيج معمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبكى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك ورعفتك أم كيف تؤلم النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يهلك لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتكلكل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتترك فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت بالموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين يقتل لولا ما حكمت بي من تعظيم جاهدك وقضيت بي من إخلاد معاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مكر ولا مقام لكن لك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجلى ثناؤك قلت مبتدئة وتتولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من علي أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمت وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل كبير أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمت أو أعلنت أخفيت أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثبات الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي والسيدي ومولاي ومالك رزقي يا من بيدي ناصية يا لمن بذري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاكتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من علي معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك الجوانه واشدد على العزيمة جوانه وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسري إليك في المبارزين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وخافك مخافة المؤمنين واجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فاعرض ومن كادني فكد واجعل لي من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وأطف علي بمدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأكلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك كذيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من عدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء والسلاح البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقم يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وفعل بي ما أنت أهل وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. رحم الله من قرأ سورة مباركة الفاتحة.
صلو علی النبی. زلزلے میں ہو کیوں نہ نینوا، زلزلے میں ہو کیوں نہ نینوا، کیوں نہ پھر ہلے دشت کربلا، ہائے فوج کی چھین لی ردا، زہرا کا گر ہائے کرب و بلا، دم گھٹا ہوا دل روندا ہوا، دم گھٹا ہوا دل روندا ہوا، گر لٹا ہوا سر کھلا ہوا، چہرے پہ ملے خاک کربلا، زہرا کا گر ہائے کرب و بلا، سر پہ شہ نہیں مجتبی نہیں، سر پہ شہ نہیں مجتبی نہیں، مرتضیٰ نہیں مصطفیٰ نہیں، ہو کے بے نوا کیوں نہ پھر بلا، زہرا کا گر ہائے کرب و بلا، دیکھ کر جسے مہر تک چھپے، دیکھ کر جسے مہر تک چھپے، بے ردا کرے اے فلک اسے، روح مصطفیٰ جان مرتضیٰ، زہرا کا گر ہائے کرب و بلا، درد غم سے منہ سب عطا ہوا، درد غم سے منہ سب عطا ہوا، دیکھے بھائی کا سر کٹا ہوا، شہر شام میں ہو کے بے ردا، ज़हरा का गर हाय करबो बला। कब्र तक नहीं एक जा हुई, कब्र तक नहीं एक जा हुई। कोई है नजफ शाम में, कोई काज़मैन यूं जुदा जुदा। ज़हरा का गर हाय करबो बला। ऐसा लुटा फिर ना बसा, ज़हरा का गर हाय करबो बला। सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद।
Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jameel wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen, as well as all other marhumin. Surah Al-Mubarak Al-Fatiha. Waishfai Maries is requested for all those who are in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 Ya Allah. The Muharram and Safar Fund is still open. Please see Brother Abbas Alu or Brother Sibtain Yusufali in the men's side, or Sister Fatima Abdul Hussein in the sister's side to make a donation. You may also use the QR code displayed on the screen in order to donate. We'll now inshallah have majlis by Sayyid Hasan Rizvi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة بعد الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، شفيع المذنبين، رحمة للعالمين، سيدنا والنبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا والطبيب ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. There's one question on Slido. We'll go through that, inshallah, and then continue our lecture series. So the person's asking, you mentioned that after the Battle of Harra, the transmission of Quran or Quranic sciences was affected. Please, could you give more information on this? Yeah. So that specific point, coincidentally, I didn't actually have it in my notes. As I was mentioning the point about the effects or the consequences and what had happened in terms of the aftermath of Harra, right, the casualties, that 80 ashab of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, that they were killed in the battle, and around 700 huffaz, right, memorizers of the Quran, were also killed in that battle. So what immediately came to mind while mentioning that point was, when you have these individuals, especially because it was a society mainly that was transmitting by, verbally, right? Speaking, less so than writing things down. So in my head, naturally, logically, the Quranic sciences and the compilation and the distribution, all these things would have been affected. So when I saw this question on Slido earlier when I was preparing before, usually history, especially this sort of detailed stuff when it comes to the history of the Quran and things like that, I don't really have much information. So I asked some of my colleagues, other ulama that I know, that specialize in this and have done a lot of extensive research. And so I asked them this, right, that, this idea just kind of came to my mind. My assumption was that, 700 huffaz in Medina get killed. Somehow this must have affected the Quran or something about the Quran. So what they had mentioned was that, no, that's probably not true. They said that by that time, after Uthman, obviously through the direction of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farjahum. At that point, without going through the detailed history of how the Quran was compiled and how they took these other versions and collected them from everywhere and burnt them and got rid of them, and so there was one mushaf, which is called Uthmani, right now. So they had this, one there, and then they had these qaris, or specific qira'at, right, that people would recite in different regions. At this point, it was standard now throughout the Muslim Ummah. So at this point, even if all of the huffaz had been killed off, it actually wouldn't have made a difference because it had become a standard in the Muslim communities by this point. So the point I mentioned was an incorrect one, right? There was actually, it doesn't seem like there was any sort of effect. And just in case, I took a quick glance at some of the narrations among the Imams of that time, specifically Imam Sajjad, Imam Baqir, and Imam Sadiq, alayhimus salam, about the Quran, recitation, recitation, things like that. I didn't really find anything. There's like one or two odd hadith about them addressing people in terms of their Quranic recitation, but it didn't seem like it was the norm. So the basic conclusion then is that I don't think, or what I'd mentioned there was probably incorrect, or most likely, definitely incorrect. It doesn't seem like the Quran, the preservation of it, the transmission of it, or the ulum al-Quran was affected at all. Now, that doesn't mean that there was no growth within the Quranic sciences, but it doesn't seem like it had much to do with the Battle of Harra, right? Because we know that many of the things that Imam Sajjad alayhi salam taught, one of them was expounding upon ayat of the Quran and starting this idea of tafsir al-Quran. But that's a separate topic which we won't go into. But hopefully I've clarified this, that no, correcting what I had said before mistakenly, there was no effect from the 700 memorizers of the Quran being killed in the Battle of Harra. So hopefully that is clear now. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is why it was a good reminder for me as well that I have to be careful of, if I haven't researched a point, to not just, say it randomly like that too, right? I should make sure I'm researching my points properly. Even when something seems like it might make sense, based on everything else, we might have researched or heard and things like that. We haven't gone out and specifically looked at the books or an article or something like that. It's probably best if we remain silent, and I should have done that. So that's my apologies. Okay, so let's continue with our topic, inshallah. We've been going through the khutbah of the eldest daughter of Imam Hussein, Fatima bint al-Hussein, alayhim as-salam. In the beginning part of the khutbah, we see that when she starts out, she praises Allah, she does hamd, she asserts her iman in Allah, her tawakkul. She recites the shahadatain. Starting out like a basic khutbah would start off, right? She mentioned specifically that the killing of Imam Hussein was not done out of some tribal conflict. It wasn't some family affair. It wasn't some honor killing. Right? There was no vengeance, no spite in that sense, right? It wasn't this back and forth like tit for tat or something like that, as many of the Arabs of that time were used to, right? This sort of tribal warfare. You hurt my tribe, I'll hurt you. Said no, it wasn't like that. She then emphasizes the fact that she makes a dua, Allah, she says, A'udhu bik, I want to be protected from lying about you and your deen. She mentions the wilayah that was sent down to Amir al-Mu'mineen, the wasiyah that was given to him. And then she goes through the dhulm that happened to Imam Ali. She talks about how his haqq was taken away from him. He was deprived. How he was made shaheed in a masjid. And then she starts speaking about those Muslims as well, that Muslims were present and they allowed this to happen. That he was oppressed during his lifetime and up to his killing as well. And they say that the Muslims had no excuse for this because his status, his taqwa, his deen, his level as a companion and a follower of Islam, as the close friend and companion, the closest one of Rasulullah, was not in denial. So she's basically calling out those individuals. Again, she's speaking to the people of Kufa who are very intimate with Imam Ali. So she's speaking, to their immediate short-term memory and their history. She then goes through the fadail of Imam Ali, that you guided him in childhood, you guided him in Islam. When he was older, he had virtues. The only thing he was concerned about was Rasulullah, about Islam. He didn't care about the dunya. He only strived for your sake. We then began to analyze just these initial points in the beginning of our khutbah. And we looked at it from two different perspectives. We said, one, we can get a taste of and an understanding of the people of Kufa. Because we said, the way that we see these speakers speaking to the people of Kufa seems different than the way they address the people in Sham. Now, we don't have time. We're not going to go through the speeches in Sham. But you, on your own time, if you're interested, go take a look, and you'll see there's a difference. The people in Sham, as we said, they didn't have this intimate knowledge and relationship with the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt never made it there. They're being guided by, the Khulafa and Muawiyah and Yazid. That's it. So they are already misdirected and misguided in their Islam. So what you see there is that when the Ahlul Bayt reach there, and when people try to teach them, that's what's happening. They're doing irshadul jahil. The people of Sham were ignorant. Yes, they did dhulm. We're not excusing their behavior. But maybe there was an excuse. They just didn't know. And that's why you see the Imam, Sayyid Zainab, they are trying to teach people, this Quran that you're reciting, this Ahlul Bayt that you're talking about, we are the Ahlul Bayt. How did you allow that to happen? And then they put two and two together. But in Kufa, it was different. These people had a spiritual disease. And we see that Fatima bint al-Hussein is trying to break through that barrier and get through to their spiritual disease. To break through and try to wake them up. Because these are practicing Muslims who knew the Ahlul Bayt. They were there with Rasulullah, they were there with Imam Ali and Imam Hasan. They knew the Ahlul Bayt. So this makes their betrayal, in a sense, even worse. Because they knew who they were and they still betrayed. That's why you see that their words of Imam Sajjad, of Bibi Zainab, of Fatima bint al-Hussein and Kulthum are very, very harsh. And inshallah, as we'll start to go through today, as we go to the next parts, we'll see how harsh, Fatima bint al-Hussein actually speaks of them. So the model then that she takes is that she's trying to break them out of their ignorance, break them out of that spiritual disease that they have. And she does it in a few different ways. Some of them, she says, maybe you just forgot. I'm reminding you, giving you a simple reminder as the Quran does to us. Some of you, maybe you have that spiritual disease, so I'm trying to break that in your heart so you wake up. But there are some amount of you that there is no hope for. And this is the harshest words that she has, as the rest of them said too, that because of your egos, because of that spiritual disease, that betrayal, you can cry all you want, you can, shed tears, you can recite poetry, do whatever you want, but it's nothing. And as we'll see in her own words, she says, you people are damned and you're doomed to hellfire because of what you've done. So she's addressing these three different types of individuals in Kufa. And the last point that we looked at was that she, as a mukhatib, as a speaker herself, is somebody who understands real wilayah. She's egoless. Her nafs is not involved. Up until this point, she makes no mention of herself whatsoever. She's not talking about her own grief or her own pain. She's talking about the dhulm that was done to the deen of Allah, to Rasulullah, to Imam Ali, and then to Imam Hussein. But never does she say, my grandfather or my father, this happened to me. She never says anything like that. She references the pain in terms of dhulm to Islam. That's it. This is somebody who understands wilayah. And it was a lesson for us too, that we said, for community growth, when we're trying to examine issues within our own families or in the larger community, we should try to see it from a higher perspective, right? An Islamic perspective. Not how you and I are personally affected by something, but rather, is this good for the deen? Is this something that Allah is radi with or upset with or He's angered with? Is this something that follows the seerah of Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt, or does it go against the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt? These are the questions we need to ask rather than this is how I'm personally being affected. If we can switch, away and try to take away our egos from these conversations, from these issues, from our growth, then maybe we'll have a, easier time in our spiritual and community growth. And this also means that we have to understand the groups that we're listening to. One of the conversations that constantly comes up is this normal, even these types of programs that we have, this monologue lecture, is this actually going to work? Many people would argue this is not really working anymore, right? This is a very difficult thing. Most people don't have the attention span, and I agree. So is this the same type of way that's been continuing for hundreds of years? Is this still going to work for us now? Or should we try to think of another way to speak to Muslim ears? So this is a summary of what we did last time. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, let's move on to the next part of her khutbah. After all of this is said and done, now she finally addresses the people of Kufa. Ya Ahl al-Kufa, Ya Ahl al-Makri wal-Ghadar wal-Khuyala. O people of Kufa, O people of betrayal, O people of deception, O people of arrogance. The same way Sayyida Zainab addressed them, she's using the same exact words. She's not toning it down at all. Inna ahlul bayt ibtalana Allah bikum wabtalakum bina. This is the first time now she is including herself in the conversation. She's saying, we, the ahlul bayt. Right? So now she's saying, look, I mentioned the fada'il of the ahlul bayt before, specifically Imam Ali, Rasulullah, etc. Now I'm connecting what's going on, what happened in Karbala, with what you guys should understand of us, right, to the people of Kufa. She's saying that undoubtedly, we are the Ahlul Bayt. Allah has tested us, Ahlul Bayt, through you, people of Kufa. And on the other side, Allah has tested you, people of Kufa, through us. It's interesting. Right away, again, instead of going into deep pain and talking about how this was difficult for her, anything like that, she's talking about it in a complete, lens of trial, of imtihan. She's saying Allah tried us, Ahlul Bayt, through all of you, just like Allah tried all of you through us. And then she adds on. She says, فَجَعَلَ بَلَاءَنَا حَسَنًا. The bala that Allah gave us is hasan. It was good, it was fair, and it was beautiful. So, a lot of times, one of the main questions that people have regarding Karbala is, how could Allah allow this to happen to the Ahlul Bayt? They were the most beloved to Allah. How could He allow such tragedies to take place, especially to Imam Hussein and his family? It doesn't make any sense. They're the best. How could they go through such trials and tribulations and suffering and all this? They say, look, that's your perspective. That's not the perspective of the Ahlul Bayt. Never in their words do you see, oh, woe is us. I can't believe this happened to us. It was so bad and difficult. They're not complaining and crying about it like this. We see this as dhulm. Other people saw it as dhulm. But the Ahlul Bayt, they take a different perspective. Yes, what took place was definitely dhulm because of the zalimeen, no doubt. But the Ahlul Bayt, when they experience something, when they go through something, even this 10-year-old daughter of Hussein is saying, look, everything is a trial, and everything that happens is a fair trial. It's a good trial. Everybody gets what they deserve. The test that came on us is because we deserve this test. And the test that came to you people of Kufa is the test that you deserve. We don't see any injustice in this because this is what Allah had willed for us. And she then goes on and explains the reasoning, perhaps, of why the Ahlul Bayt get such difficult tests. وَجَعَلَ عِلْمَهُ عِنْدَنَا وَفَهْمَهُ لَدَيْنَا. Perhaps the reason why we, Ahlul Bayt, get such difficult tests and trials, and we believe that this trial is beautiful and it's good and it's fair, is because Allah has placed His ilm with us. He has placed His fahm, His understanding and comprehension with us. We are the ones who receive this. فَنَحْنُ عَيْبَةُ عِلْمِ. We are the containers and the receptacles of His divine knowledge. We are the ones who get that. So she's trying to give us this natural conclusion that the reason that all these tests take place to us is because we are the ones who have been given these gifts too. If you get those higher level gifts, then you're going to get harder trials. That's what makes sense, right? It's a logical point. Anybody who goes to in grade school, the test should be relatively simple. You go to a test when you're getting your bachelor's. It should be a bit more difficult. When you go for your master's, it should be even harder. PhD, even more difficult. You're trying for a job interview in a specialized field. That test should be, very, very difficult, given your knowledge base. If the Ahlul Bayt are the cream of the crop, if they've been given the most knowledge that a mortal, finite person should be given, then obviously, logically, they should be given the toughest test as well. You and I, or the people of Kufa, they don't have this. They don't have this knowledge. They don't have this understanding. So their test is going to be very, very different. It's not going to be the same. You and I, alhamdulillah, we're not created like the Ahlul Bayt because we couldn't handle it. If we were given that same knowledge, we'd be given the same trials. Ask yourself, even when we go through the few difficulties that you and I go through, do we have even 1/100th, 1/1000th of the sabr of the Ahlul Bayt? Probably not. And it's because we haven't even gone through 1/100th or 1/1000th of the difficulties that they've gone through. But you see that their level of sabr is equivalent to their level of knowledge and wisdom as well. وَوِعَاهُ فَهْمِهِ وَحِكْمَتِهِ. We are the containers of His knowledge, His understanding, His wisdom. وَحُجَّتُهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ فِي بَلَادِهِ لِعِبَادِهِ. And then she ties it all together. We are His living proofs. We, Ahlul Bayt, because of these trials, because of the knowledge we've been given, we are the proofs. So when we are placed in Karbala and all this happens to us and we're taken through Kufa, we are Allah's arguments, His proof. Because now Allah has an argument against both sides on the Day of Judgment. To say, Ahlul Bayt, I gave you knowledge, I gave you wisdom, I gave you this, what did you do with it? They said, look, we were in Karbala, we had sabr. We were dragged through Kufa and Sham, we had sabr. This is what we did. We carried on the message of the Ahlul Bayt and we didn't waver at all. But the question then is going to be asked of the people of Kufa. And this is perhaps why Sayyidah Fatima bint al-Hussein is saying it in this way. You believed in Risala, you believed in Wilaya, you followed Imam Ali, you understood that Imam Hussein was a member of the Ahlul Bayt, you knew everything, yet you betrayed him. Your test was actually very, very simple. You didn't have to betray, but you did. So you failed your test. This is what she's trying to get them to understand. The test that they had was fair for them, just like the test that the Ahlul Bayt had was fair for them as well. أكرمنا الله بكرامتي وفضلنا بنبيه صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم على كثير من خلق تفضيلا. He has honored us with, this kirama. He has gifted us and graced us with fada'il and virtues. And He's given us superiority through His Nabi, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. So you see, she, a 10, 11-year-old girl, is able to give us an insight on how we can look at good and evil, on bala, on trials and struggles. The more you're given, The more knowledge you get, the tougher it's going to be. We have in our narrations as well that the Shia are going to be tried more than anybody else because we have more knowledge about what is true and what's real than anybody else. Even more than the Ahlul Sunnah. We have that key to Jannah, which is wilayah. They don't have that. But that also means that we're going to be tested through wilayah. And wilayah is not simply about me, because we don't have an Imam Hussein in front of us in that sense. But there are modern day versions of manifestations and realizations of wilayah in our community every single day that maybe you and I are not passing, maybe we are failing based on our level of knowledge. One thing we need to ask ourselves is that, okay, if I know about the principles of the Ahlul Bayt, I have agreed, I've given bay'ah to the Imam of the time, I know who his representatives are. Am I following through with my bay'ah to the Imam or not? And all the things that go along with that. Or am I failing like the Kufans have failed? Am I one of these people of betrayal and deceit? And inshallah, we'll talk about the specific types of betrayal and deceit. This was the next part of the khutbah, which we'll mention in our next majlis. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This notion of being tried, having difficulties, is a theme that permeates throughout Karbala, throughout the tragedy. You know, we said that for the shuhada, going out to battle, that wasn't a difficult thing for them. These were trained warriors. They fought, they competed with one another to see who would become shaheed first. They loved shahada. That wasn't a difficult thing for them. But the other trials, those were the difficult things. When somebody is tried in terms of, if you're a warrior, being tried in terms of a defensive jihad is not a big deal. You're trained, you take your sword and you go and defend yourself, that's it. But when your izzah is tested, that's difficult. And the izzah of the Ahlul Bayt, especially the women and the children, this is what was tried. And this is the part that makes it so much more difficult. Yes, Ashura was very, very difficult. But compared to Sham-e-Ghariba, compared to what happened in Kufa and Sham and afterwards, Ashura pales in comparison. You tell me, what mother is prepared to see her child slaughtered on a battlefield like this? And they say that on that day, on Ashura, when all of these mothers, most of them had gone out, and some of them were waiting on the battlefield, right? They said, for example, when Layla had gone outside of the camps and tents, she knew that when she had finally seen Akbar for the last time, that her Akbar was not coming back. She expected that. She knew that. She was trained. When Zainab sent out On and Muhammad, she said that, I know my children are going out to become shaheed. She was okay with that. She was ready for that. All of these mothers would go, and sometimes they'd go outside, they'd be waiting, but they say, no, we know that it's the body of our children that are coming back. But when Rabab goes and she puts Asghar in the hands of Hussein and says, please just quench the thirst of our 6-month-old, there was not one thought in the heart of Rabab that made her think that when my child, my baby goes out, I'll come back and there will be a dead body in the hands of my husband. No mother is prepared for enemies like this. No mother has ever been trained to deal with a bala and a trial like this. Yet you see, even Imam Hussein, when he's trying to come back to the camps, even he doesn't know how he's going to address Rabab at this point. As he goes back and forth 7 times, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. Maybe he's thinking, Allah, I know your plans, I know your command, I know I was okay with seeing my son slaughtered because you were watching, but how can I bring back this baby to Rabab? How can I give a mother a child like this? What am I supposed to do? And when they go behind the tents and they're digging that grave with Dhul-Fiqar, as Rabab and Hussein are digging that grave, they say this is where Hussein turns to Furat and he says, Abbas, look at your brother Hussein right now. Do you remember when Ibrahim, the son of Rasulullah, had passed away? And do you know what happened? Our father Ali had gone to Rasulullah and said, no father should bury his young son like this. Now Abbas, look at Hussein right now burying his 6-month-old child. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
मोमिनों कर लो बुका मातम शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। मोमिनों कर लो बुका मातम शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। अपना बदन पाश पाश कांधे पे अकबर की लाश, मुंशी को देखो तो क्या हालते शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। मोमिनों कर लो बुका मातमे शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। सैयद सज्जाद का नौहा ये मक्तल में था, शेके गले पर फिरा जुल्म का शमशीर का ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। मोमिनों कर लो बुका मातमे शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। सैयद सज्जाद चा क्यों कर चले नंगे पा, हाथों पे हथकरिया है पाँवों में जंजीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। मोमिनों कर लो बुका मातमे शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। मोमिनों कर लो बुका मातमे शब्बीर है ज़ैनबे दिलगीर है। सूरत मुबारक अल-फातिहा।
السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمتان قتلتك ولعن الله أمتان ظلمتك ولعن الله أمتان سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبثك من مذلهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من داعم الدين وأركان المؤمنين. وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أنك الإمام وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والأروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبي بكم موقن، بشراء ديني وخواتيني عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم، وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها الشهيد، السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه، السلام عليكم يا أسفياء الله وأوداعه، السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصح، السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله، بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم، وتوابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم، وفزتم فوزا عظيما، فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم الإسلام، وأقدمهم إيمانا، وأقومهم بدين الله، وأحوتهم على الإسلام. أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المعاسي، فلعن الله أمة قتلتك، ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام. فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر، وله الدافع نخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب، فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل، وألحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبكي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر لحد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين، وأختك زينب وأم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة جميعا، ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسن يا زين العابدين، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر، السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق، السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم، السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الجواد، السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي، السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري، السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن يا صاحب الزمان، السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمامنا وإمام الإنس والجان، عجل على ظهورك يا ابن الحسن. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم كن لوليك لحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرزك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.